That's funny.
That is, that's neat.
What is Liz Taylor doing in
Buying food.
Well, they do. They all eat. You know, that's the one thing that nobody knows.
You've got celebrities in Evansville now, haven't you?
Oh, yes,
Making
we're
the
having,
movies.
what is it, League of Your Own? League of Your
Yeah,
Own?
League of-
They're making a movie.
By Honeyburg, they're shooting too. That's just 6 miles.
But you know, they're going to make it, of course, I mean, we don't think of ourselves as a hick town at all, but the way they're doing, of course, they're going way back,
They
and they're
make
using
us
all
look
country
like
scenes,
real,
and they're gonna make it look like a hick
Yes.
place.
Yeah.
Well, I went to Honeyburg and I looked at the set there. That's my union that I work for is a film. That's the type of business I do.
Oh.
I go work for San Diego Opera, our movies, you know, and stuff like that. So that's my union is the stagehands that build scenery and put on movies and stuff like that. I work a few movies. And so I
You
went
know
by.
Ron Glass?
No, I don't, but it sounds familiar.
You know, he's a movie star,
Uh-huh.
and he's from Evansville.
Oh, I see.
He went to the University of Evansville and
Oh,
attended
right.
the University of Theater there. And I used to work with him. I used to do some directing
Uh-huh.
and working at the theater.
Well, I saw that. I saw your pictures there that you did that.
Pardon?
I saw some pictures of you sitting in a
Yeah,
director's
the
chair.
Oh, you did, yeah.
Yeah, that we have of doing that and stuff.
Mama
I
just
figured
left.
that's where we must have got it because I've been in theater my whole life since high school.
Oh, you know, of course, I went to the private girls' school, and I studied drama, and I studied voice, and I studied piano, and I had a course in interior decorating. And anyway, when I graduated from high school, at that time, we didn't have too many choices about what to do. I mean, you could be a secretary or a teacher or a nurse, and I thought, what am I going? And I loved acting and drama and theater and things like that. So I wanted to go to there was a drama school in Cincinnati, and I wanted so badly to go. And Gertrude Van Bowling just had a fit. I mean, all they'd ever heard, that young girls go up there and the directors take advantage of them and everything. You know? And they just, they wouldn't have any part of it. So then I was kind of left, didn't know what to do, so then I went into nursing, and I had to do something. Had to advance my education someplace.
You
So I
still
came-
did opera, didn't you? Did
Pardon?
you do some kind of opera, directed an orchestra?
Yes, I've directed. I was a guest director for our not opera, for the Philharmonic.
Oh, I
orchestra
see, yeah.
concert.
Orchestra, yeah.
That was
Well,
neat.
that's pretty fun. That's a lot of fun.
She didn't know we were there, and we all stood
No,
up.
and then all of a sudden I saw these people standing up, and I thought, oh my God, I'm getting a standing applause, and I recognized Tom.
There they were clapping.
She
away.
didn't
Yeah.
know we were
Yeah,
coming,
they
and
stood
we all
up
got together and came.
Gave standing applause,
That's great.
standing ovation.
Yeah, of course, I would do that too if I saw somebody. I'd do the same.
Yeah.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
That must be where I got it from. I mean, somewhere in the family, because I believe Aurelia, Mama Jones was.
Well, now there was somebody else that at the reunion last year. There was a young girl.
Diane?
Huh?
Diane, my daughter,
Oh,
the
her
one that
daughter.
looked like
Oh, is
Sharon.
that, well, yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, I talked to her, and she was talking about she was going to have to leave or something. She had an engagement
Yeah,
or
she
something.
Pageant, or
It's-
beauty pageant.
She directs beauty.
Yeah, for a beauty pageant. Yeah, she was doing something on a beauty pageant. So I was asking her, some questions on it. And then I kind of said, oh, well, I remember when I did thus and so, one thing and another. I said, I was Miss Washington, and I was first runner-up for Miss Indiana. I didn't, there's a lot of people think I was Miss Indiana, but I wasn't.
What year was that?
1928.
Great.
Long time ago. Uh-huh. But anyway, I started talking to her about it, and she said, well, I knew I got this someplace.
That was Diana. That was
Well,
Diana.
that's the same thing with me.
She said the same thing that you did.
Diane and Sharon look quite a bit alike, don't they?
Yes, I think they do.
They
Uh-huh.
do. They were sitting
I
together.
called Sharon and told her you all were coming. I thought maybe she'd come over, but she had an appointment. She couldn't
Oh.
come. And then I saw Ted Jr. I was out at the country club for lunch yesterday, and Ted Jr. came in. He was out golfing, and he's my oldest son. He's an attorney, and he knew it was Ladies' Day, so he came in to the dining room where we all were looking for Mother, and. Anyway, I said something to him about it. He said, "Oh, Mother, my God, I got such a full day.
Oh, that's
I got to do so." He
I
could.
wish he could have given you more notice so we could have met them. Now, Ted is the lawyer.
Yes,
Ted is
and Jerry runs the funeral homes. We have four mortuaries. And I met Ted Ziemer after I came over here, 2 o'clock in the morning over a dead body. Well, I was working at the hospital, you know, and there was this patient well, as a matter of fact, I was working on the annex at the old St. Mary's, what was out on First Avenue, and I wasn't busy, and anyway, Miss Cox was over on the first floor, and they have the charity ward over there, and she was just busy as a cranberry merchant. She had a couple of people that were very ill and one thing and another, so the night nun came over to our floor and wanted to know if all my patients were resting and everything, and I said yes, that they were, and so she said, well, Miss Cox needed some help, wondered if I could come over to first floor and help her. And of course, there's a bell at the end of the hall I'd have to watch in case anybody rang for me, you know. And so I went over, and so when I got over there, I asked her what she'd like for me to do, and she said, she said, there's a patient in such and such a room that just passed away, and she said he's got to be cleaned up and prepared for the family to come and one thing and another. So I said, okay, I'll take care of it. So I was in there, and the first thing you know, this young man walked in, and he said, hello, he said, I'm Ted Ziemer from Ziemer Funeral Homes, and I told him, introduced myself. I told him I was Camilla Jones, and I said, he said, has a family arrived? And I said, no, they hadn't come yet. So he said, well, he said, I'll just wait here if it's all right. And I said, well, yes, it's all right. So I said, excuse me, I see a light on over on the other floor. I said, I'm going to have to go over there. And so I left the room and went over to the annex. And so there was I remember his name was Mr. Kraft, and he was an elderly gentleman. In those days they didn't have nursing homes, you know, and people would come in the hospital and stay till they died. And so I went down to Mr. Kraft's room, and he was restless, and he wanted something to sleep. And so I said, well, I'd go check. And so I went back to the chart room to check and see whether, you know, it was all right for him to have it or time. And he could. So then I went to the medicine room because everything's locked up, you know, and I got out there my key and started opening, and all of a sudden I sent somebody in there. I turned around, and here was this young man. I said, what are you doing here? You're not allowed in this apartment. I said, please go out the hall. And so he stepped back out in the hall, and then I went down and gave Mr. Kraft his medication. I came back. He was still standing there, and I said, can I do something for you? And he said, well, I just can't take my eyes off of you. He said,
oh, that's sweet.
And I said, now, who are you? You know, because I hadn't really paid that much attention before I knew that he was the funeral director that had come in. And so anyway, then he told me who he was and one thing and another. So after that, I heard so many people talking about this funeral business and how nice these people were, what a nice family they were, and what a wonderful person he was, and so on and so forth. And I thought, well, that was that same guy that I saw the other night. And so a week or two after that, he called me and wanted to know if I wouldn't like to go out to dinner and go to a movie. So I thought, well, I guess I could. I mean, I didn't really know him that well, but I thought, you know, he had a good reputation. So we went out together, and first thing you know, we were going steady and became engaged.
Oh.
So I married the Undertaker.
The rest is history.
Then which of your children are the oldest?
Ted Jr.
Ted Jr.
He's the attorney.
Uh-huh.
And Jerry, well, Sharon is next. And then Jerry, and he runs the funeral homes. And then the next is Edward. He's a sales promotion director for BFI. And he wasn't a bit interested in coming in the funeral business. And then my youngest son, Patrick, had thought that he might come into it, so he did. He worked for a while with Jared. He went to Indianapolis and took his course in mortuary science after he graduated. He went to USI, and after he graduated out there, he was one of the first students out there. And so he went and took his course in mortuary science, and he came back, and I don't know, he just, well, I think for one thing, his wife didn't like it that he was gone so much, and going at night and going on Sundays, and I mean, they do, you know, they get a call. It's that kind of business is 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and if they get a call or get busy, they've got to go. And so anyway, he just decided, he came one day, he said, Mom, I want to talk to you, and he came out here, and he said, Mother, this isn't for me. So Jerry's the only one. Now, he has a son that's in college, will graduate next year and next spring, and he's going to come into the business. Of course, he has to go to
So you will
England.
have some family
Yeah,
continuing with them.
so it's continued right on with the family. And, but see, my part of the family are the only ones that's left in the Ziemers. They're all gone. As a matter of fact, there were 2 priests in the family, and of course they had no children, and Adam and Leo were the 2 older ones, and one had 3 daughters and one had 2 daughters. And then there was Rudolph, and he never married. And then Ted he was second youngest. He had a sister that was younger. Of course, if any of them would marry, they wouldn't have Ziemers. And so anyway, after Ted and I got married, I was pregnant, and Grandmother Ziemer came up to me and she said, "If you don't have a boy, the Ziemer name's going to stop in Evansville." And I thought, oh my God.
That was command.
I've got to do what she says. And sure enough, I had 4, and so there's 9 sons from them, so we got lots of Ziemers. And I go places, sometimes people say, "Oh, are you related to, mention one of the grandchildren?" I say, "Yeah, if they're a Ziemer, they're my fault."
They all are
Yeah,
now,
I
because
was
you're
the only one
that had the heirs.
and now they're all the rest of the family's all dead. And I mean, even Ted. Well, this is Ted's portrait up here. You a handsome gentleman?
Yeah.
And
Is that your wedding picture behind you there?
the one back there.
one?
Yeah.
One is me, and the other one is my daughter Sharon. The wedding picture is my daughter Sharon.
And the one in the entrance is
Pardon?
her.
She looks like you.
Oh, well, I don't think she does much now as she did when she was younger. I don't know.
I was surprised when we took a snapshot of Sharon and Diana together, and I got home and everybody was saying that.
Yeah, I looked at
And
it,
I
I
thought,
thought,
my goodness, they do. And I said, well, they're genetic. They're cousins. Sure, they can look alike. I mean, they could get the
First cousins.
Yeah, the first cousins. A lot of times
Everybody
first
asked Mickey, Tom's daughter, when I lived with her, if we were brothers and sisters. Always, everywhere we went, there were we brothers and sisters.
But the cousins, the
Yeah.
genetics that could
Well,
very
there's
well.
bound to be some resemblance. Well, Tom looks a lot like his dad.
Everybody says I look more like my mother.
Do you think so?
She's got a nose this way, Betty has. Mine's this way, like Mom's.
Well, you remind me a lot of Aurelia when she was younger, and
Yeah, I remember you coming to our house.
Troxler.
How do you remember the boys when you came to our house? I was the baby.
Yeah, you were the baby, and then and of course Norbert. I don't remember much about him, but I remember Tom and Homer, and they were of course they were younger than I, but I used to come over to visit sometime in the summer for a week or so, and I used to help them with their bicycles and pull them their little red
You know,
wagons and.
Seems like I'm narrowing on the gap between us. I was 70 my last birthday. Boy, it's unbelievable.
How old are you now, Tom?
70.
70.
That's what I said. I've been narrowing the gap between us. It don't seem like that
See,
much
I was
difference.
10 years older than
Yeah.
you.
But at that age, 10 years, it seems like, oh, they're
Oh,
old,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
But now when he's 70 and you're 80, you're younger. That's not fair. You cheated. You kept young some way.
Well, I don't know, sometimes I feel it.
So anyhow, just to get this all on record for me, for my sake when I do this, can we start, I've been filming, so anyhow, but I like to start with your birthday and your name and who your parents were. Just so I can have this all on record and start that way, okay, the date you were born, and a little bit about what you remember your childhood, some of the youngest years on up.
Because I don't remember too much, but
And it's fine, I don't mind at all if we repeat what
Delphi or
yeah,
somebody
what
else
Delphi
is
is saying,
saying.
because so far it's already been different a little bit,
Yeah.
and stuff, and so that's what we're here for, and that's why they're all telling me a different story about Papa John's and, about being raised.
Well, there were they tell me that my mother had 12 children, but there were only 9 that I ever knew about. And of course, then Doris said that she had some stillborns. So anyway, there was Homer and Earl and Doris, and then there was James and Willie Sherman and Andrew and Maggie. Maggie came in before Andrew, and Delphia and myself. So the 9 was all I ever knew of. Now, when I was a baby, they got this epidemic of typhoid fever, and as I understand it, of course he was in the livery business. Andrew Jones had a livery stable. In those days, they didn't have any cars, you know. In fact, we owned the first car. We had a Model T Ford, and we owned the first car in Lagodi. And they took a picture of me sitting on the running board. I don't know where that is. And I was just a little tyke, 2 or 3 years old. And but anyway, I don't remember too much. I remember one time seeing Maggie. There were no bathrooms, of course, you know, outdoor toilets. I mean, we had a great big house, but I mean, they just didn't have bathrooms in those days. And Maggie was, I remember, I started to go out the back door, and they stopped me and wouldn't let me go. And they were giving Maggie a bath in this big tub out in the backyard. And they wouldn't let me go sit. And I couldn't understand why I couldn't go upstairs and see that, see what was going on. And I don't know where they bathed me. I don't remember. Must have bathed me someplace. But I just remember that she was out there in a tub in the backyard. Now, some of these things, when I mentioned them later, Doris said, "Oh, you don't remember that. You were too little." She said that some of the family has told you that. So I thought, well, maybe they did, but you know, there's just certain little episodes that come to my mind that I feel like I can really remember. But anyway, we had this epidemic of typhoid fever, and they said that we got it from the cows. We had pasture and cows, and they were not where we were out on the farm. And we had men that milked the cows, and they came in, and we had our own milk, you know, and things of that sort. And they said that they cultivated this typhoid germ from the creek that ran through the farm, and that we were contaminated through the cow's milk. And but anyway, we started having this episode, and of course we were quarantined, and now I can remember that there a nurse and doctor. They said there were 2 nurses and a doctor that were quarantined in the house that could not leave, and because they'd had a big sign up on the door, no quarantine, nobody comes, nobody goes. I mean, you had to stay there. But anyway, there was in the very beginning when some of them got sick, Doris had, as I said, she had Bernie and she had Earl, and she was pregnant with Carl, and the sickness was just starting and one thing or another, and some of them thought that maybe Doris could, or she offered or something, but anyway, to take the little ones out of the way. Well, of course, they said they wouldn't let me go because they wouldn't let me leave my mother. So I don't know whether I was still nursing or what they thought I was doing, but at the time. But anyway, Delphia went to Washington. Homer and Earl enlisted in the First World War, so they were gone, and Doris was in Washington, and she had Delphia. Now, of all the rest, I can remember that we had a great big living room, and they had curtains up on ropes or something and had beds moved in, you know, like hospital beds. So they turned it into like a sanitarium, you know, to take care. There were so many sick at one time. So they all died, including my mother and father, and Homer and Earl and Doris. I mean, all told me that I was the only one that had it and lived. So I said, well, I guess only the good die young. But anyway, Delphia has said that they told her that she had it twice. Well, I don't think she could have had it and left and gone to Doris's for one thing. She had to go to, Doris had to take her when, before this epidemic was really, they had decided what it was and everything was going. And she was down in Washington with her all the time. And then also, you are naturally immunized when you have it, so you can't have it a second time. She said, well, somebody told her she had it twice, so I don't know anything about that. But I know Doris and Homer and Earl always told me that I was the only one that had it and lived. So I don't think Delphia had it at all, but that's neither here nor there. I can recall when my father died that, of course, they couldn't have visitation at the house or anything so they did take him and embalm him, and they took him over across the street to a neighbor's house they had a big picture window, and they displayed him in this picture window so people could go up and down the street and see him, but they couldn't go in to where the body was at all. And so anyway, just a few little episodes like that. I remember one time seeing Andrew Jones, my father. He had a mustache, and he had it shaved off, and had come home one day, and I know my mother and he were cutting up about it, She said, oh, I don't know you, that sort of thing. And he said, you mean you're not going to let me in? No, you can't come in here, I don't know you. And as I said, they told me, oh, you can't remember that, you were too young. But there are just certain flashes like that in my mind. And anyway, eventually, everybody was gone. And I did go down to Doris's, and Gertrude and Julian Bowling, his mother was my mother's sister. She was Mary Patterson, and she was married to Jim Bowling, and she had a son, Julian, who was, of course, quite a bit older. He was like my older sisters and brothers, and he married a Gertrude McAtee. And she had appendicitis as quite a young girl, and you've heard of these operations on the kitchen table, and they supposedly did this operation on the kitchen table. And of course, the doctors, they didn't have the antibiotics and things that they have today, and so anyway, when they did the surgery, for the appendicitis, they removed her tubes and ovaries. Now, whether the infection had spread or whether they didn't know or what the situation was, it's hard for me to understand that with today's surgical procedures, that would be necessary. Yes. But that happened at that time, so the doctor told them that she'd never be able to have a child. So of course, they wanted to adopt a child, and after my parents were gone, they wanted me because I was family. And so they went to Doris and Homer and Earl, of course Homer and Earl were still in service at that time, but they checked with them in some roundabout way and wanted to know if they could possibly have me. Well, as I was told by the Bowlings, that they agreed that they could, but they could not adopt me. They weren't going to let their baby sister leave the family. And then Homer and Earl both said that when they got out of service and whenever they got married, one of them would take me, come and get me. And so I went to the Bowlings with that understanding. I didn't know it. But of course, they were the only mother and dad I knew. I called them Mom and Dad, and they were so wonderful to me. There wasn't anything that I could have ever wanted that a person would want and didn't get. They were just marvelous to me. And of course, that was home. Well, anyway, when Homer and Earl did get out of service, I can remember, I don't know, I must have been about 6 or 7 years old then. And I can remember them coming in and bringing me a box of candy. And of course, I didn't remember them at all. I mean, they were just total strangers. And of course, Delphia lived with Doris, and so we weren't really together that much. We didn't live too far apart, but I didn't see him that much. So I was sort of raised away from the family, so to speak. And anyway, Earl was the first to get married. He married Lillian Brewer. And so then after they were married, they were living in Indianapolis. I don't know whether they bought a home or what, but they had a home there. And so they came down and were going to take me to live with them. And I think by that time, I don't know, I may have been about 7 years old, but I didn't know what was going on, but I went with them to Indianapolis, and I just was very unhappy. And I must have been a little pain in the neck because I just wanted to go home, and I didn't like anything that went on. I didn't like anything they did. And they just were having such a problem. They finally, well, as a matter of fact, they called and had Doris and Will to bring Delphia up to stay with me for a few days. Thought maybe she could kind of calm me down or something. Well, that didn't do a bit of good. And because really I didn't feel that close to her. She wasn't any closer to me than somebody I knew in the neighborhood. And so anyway, they finally called Gertrude and Julian Bowling and asked them if they would consider taking me back. Oh, they just couldn't wait to get up there.
Oh, man.
And I couldn't wait to see them. I mean, my God, that was Mom and Dad. I mean, that was a terrible disruption in my life. And so they still didn't want me to be adopted. They wanted me to stay in the family. And but they said, well, there would be one stipulation, and that would be that they would have full control of my education, of what I did, and everything, and that none of them could interfere with what went on, So they agreed to that. So, as I said, I grew up with the Bowlings, and sort of Homer was, after he married, was living in Jasper, and Earl was up in Indianapolis. And it really wasn't until I got to high school days that I would go and visit sometime for a week. And so they were more like cousins or something than they were brothers and sisters. I really wasn't that close with any of them. And but anyway, Delphia grew up with the Bullocks, and she is part of the Bullock family. Yeah. She's of course now the Bullock kids, I was really closer to than I was to her because I went to school with Bernie and Earl. And we both went to they went to what they called Washington School, had a grade school, Catholic grade school, and I went to St. Simon Academy, which was a private girls' school, and it was affiliated with St. Mary's the Woods. They had Sisters of Providence, and as we went along, as I said, I studied piano and studied the voice, and I directed the choir, and Miss Washington, and I used to work in plays and things, and I just had a wonderful life. And as a matter of fact, I have a little letter in there. I'll tell you here just a few years back. I don't know, maybe you don't want this sort of stuff. Do you?
Oh, yes, this is very interesting.
Well, I had a letter from a fellow, his name was Brothers, and he was from Washington, and he lived in, I believe, Philadelphia or someplace, and he was going back to Washington, but in the meantime, they had Washington Catholic High, and then later St. Simon's was gone, and then it became, one was a girls' school, one was a boys' school, and then later the Washington Catholic High became co-educational. And, but anyway, he was, of course, when he went to school there, and they were going to have a class reunion, and he started doing some researching about the history, sort of a historian type person, and he started doing some researching about the school and things that had gone on, and something came up about the school song. They wondered how the school song had originated that they had for Washington Catholic High, and where they got their name of cardinals and their colors of red and white and so on and so forth. And so he was asking around Washington, and somebody told him, he said, well, you know, Camilla Jones was the first female cheerleader that they had at Washington Catholic High. And she said, they said she lives in Evansville. I bet if you get in touch with her, she could tell you some of those things. So I think through Delphi, I don't know how he got my address, but through somebody, he got my address and wrote me. Well, of course, I wrote back, and I told him, yes, I was. At that time, it was still just private boys' school, Washington Catholic High. And St. Simon Academy was across the street, and they wanted, they had boy cheerleaders for the basketball games, and they had, some of them had decided they thought it'd be nice to have a girl cheerleader because so many of the places where they went, they had girls and boys, you know. So they approached me and asked me if I would consider being a cheerleader. So I took it up and started working with the cheerleaders, and I know one of them was Johnny Williams. They have Williams Drugstore in Washington, and anyway, I led cheers, one thing or another. Then first thing you know, they used to play the Notre Dame song, and they didn't really have a name. It was just Washington Catholic High, you know. So they got to talking about some of the teams and one thing or another, and they wanted to sort of get a name or something going. So I suggested that we have a ballot box and let the team players and different ones drop in suggested names and colors and one thing or another, and we tried to decide on something. So Joe Kane, I don't know whether you've ever heard of Joe Kane or not. He was a coach here at Memorial for several years later, but he was playing on the basketball team at that time, and he had put in the suggestion box the name of Cardinals and the color of red and white. And when some of us went through it, the cheerleaders worked with the team on it, and we decided that was, you know, Cardinals was a good idea, and really it was taken from the St. Louis Cardinals, and their colors were red and white. That's where the whole thing was really stolen from them. But anyway, then they decided they'd like to have a school song. So they asked me if I thought that I could compose a school song. So I got together with Mary Osmond. Now at that time, she later married Bernie Bullock. She was Bernie Bullock's first wife. And Mary played the piano by ear. And she could just play anything. I used to, because I took lessons and studied, you know, and worked so hard at it all. And she could just sit down, and all you have to do is sit down and hum it, and she'd play it. And I used to think, gosh, how can she do that? But anyway, I went to Mary and I told her some ideas that I had for after the name Cardinals was selected, to use the name Cardinals, and we'd have to find a song. So we started going through the college songs and different songs, and then we'd hum them and she'd play it on the piano, you know. And anyway, we came up with the Washington Lee Swing from Washington University, and decided, well, that would fit in the words that I had in mind. So I wrote the words for the song, for the school song, and they're still using it to this day. Oh. So anyway, this fellow these were the things he was trying to find out. So then he went on and checked into some of the things that I said. I talked about Mary Osmond, you know. I said she played a mean piano. That's an expression we used at that time. And excuse me, there's my phone again. Hello? This is she. Well, I don't have time to talk to you now. I have guests. Sorry. Canadian Lottery.
Give us money.
Huh?
Canadian lottery.
I've played it before.
Canadian one?
Yeah.
We had the local ones.
Yeah,
Sing the school song.
No.
But anyway,
He wants you to sing the school song.
oh,
Still know it?
cheer for the red and white of Washington. Cheer for the Cardinals, ever brave and true. To their school they're always faithful. Just like the student body, they too love their alma mater. Work with them and aim to win. Now that's the motto that always pulls us through. Cheer for the red and white of Washington, Washington free. Cheers for you. Rock, rock, rock.
Hey!
they did when I went to.
Oh, yeah, it's still, yeah, they're still using it, and that's why, and this fellow by the name of Brothers, anyway, after I wrote back and told him, and then, of course, I talked about St. Simon's and Mary Osmond working with me, one thing and another, and he checked with St. Mary's the Woods, and they still had a record of who the students were. He wrote back, gave me the names of everybody in our class, and then, of course, I had said that Mary Osmond was at one time married to Bernie Bullock, and that they'd gotten a divorce, and then he got all excited about that because he had dated Anita Bullock in high school. And so anyway, I got in here, I should show it to you. It's Cheer for the red and white, a song is born. Now this is what he finally wrote back to me, and the information he had gathered and so forth, and they've made this now. It's in the records at the courthouse in Washington. They've had it all recorded in the history of the school. And what are you pointing to?
The most popular girl in school.
Huh?
The most popular girl in school.
Oh, yes.
Camilla Jones.
Well, he said that. I didn't tell him that.
I lived on 9 West how do you pronounce that street? West Heffmore
Where you live, 9-1.
9 West Heffron.
Street. She's the youngest sister of Anita Bullock's mom. That's cool.
Well, he goes on and talks about, and then he got the words to a song. Oh, and through the years, it had changed just a little bit. The way I wrote it was, work with them and aim to win. Now that's the motto that always pulls us through. And through the years, somehow it's been changed to work with them and always win. And that's the motto that always pulls us through. Well, I would never put always in twice.
Right.
And anyway, that's the only change that's been in it. I mean, and I think that's just when different kids sing it and hear it sound, instead of saying work with them and aim to win, they said work with them and always win.
You bring the whiskey and I'll bring the rum.
Pardon?
You bring the whiskey
Oh,
and
well, I had told him that. I said, we used to just cut about that. We used to sing, cheer, cheer for old Washington, you bring the whiskey, I'll bring the rum. You know what I mean?
We always have parodies on
Yeah,
school
yeah,
songs.
just,
Yeah.
fantastic.
and I had told him about that, so anyway, then he wrote back, he was just all excited about it. And so when they had their class reunion, they brought all this up and everything, and then they called me and asked me if I could possibly come up. They wanted to
Just try out
present
for a
an
second.
award to me. Pardon?
Just give me a second.
Time out, you have to change it.
Fine. Go ahead, I'm sorry for interrupting.
Well, that's all right. I mean, I don't know where to go from there.
This is fascinating to me that you remember the house and them being sick. I had never heard anything like that.
What?
When you remember
Well, now you see, I do because I was there, and I had typhoid fever, and they told me, I don't remember, but of course you have so much fever and you have interior bleeding, you know, and it affects the gallbladder, and I mean, in fact, I've had doctors check a lot of my parts because of my history, you know, of having had typhoid fever, and I have a low thyroid. And they said that was, I mean, my thyroid, just like I don't have one. I mean, it's just
Do you
dead.
remember your mother dying?
I remember her, well, in fact, I had a picture of her in her casket. Have you ever seen that picture? And there's a big mirror on the wall, and of course she's at home, and they have her, you know, displayed at home in the casket.
Or
And,
did they let people come see her?
Well, I don't remember that. I really only remember her from this picture. I don't remember this.
But you remembered your dad being displayed.
But in this picture, she's in the casket, and they took a picture of her in the casket, and then there's a big mirror on the wall, and there's a sheet hanging over that mirror so that it wouldn't reflect, I guess. And So that's about all that I remember about that. I
Do you
mean, it just-
remember your emotions when they died and you had
No,
to go?
no.
You don't remember that?
No, I remember, as I said, I remember when they showed my dad over there. But see, I was only about 2 or 3 years
Yes.
old. I was just so young, I didn't.
Let me just borrow a plug in here real quick and recharge
Yeah,
the
they,
battery.
uh,
There's one right here, right?
yeah.
You know. Aunt Debbie said she remembers when they auctioned.
I think that's a hot one. Some of mine work on a switch. Can you
Sure
tell?
is, yes.
Is it?
It's on.
Were you there when they auctioned off all their stuff? Were you around?
No, I don't remember any of that. I mean,
Aunt Delphi told us about it. She said she kind of remembers and people coming in and out and taking things.
well, I don't know. Well, that must have been after everybody was dead and everything, and I probably was down with the Bowlings, and probably she went up with Doris, and
And you were too young, you
uh,
no.
so because I
But
don't.
she has the
She has
pan.
one thing.
They gave her one thing.
One thing.
The auctioneer asked her if is there anything you want in this house?
And she said, I was only 6.
And
was
she
a
picked up a
six-year-old.
pan that I guess mom
A one-egg
made eggs,
skillet.
an egg and a skillet.
No, one
That's the only thing she has. of her
She has
mom.
Only
that frying pan that Delphi does, and that's the only thing she has, and she
She
brought
goes,
it.
well, I was only 6. I didn't know some guy comes up and goes, what do you want out of this house? She was a 6-year-old. What does she know?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So she took she remembers the egg
Yeah.
pan.
Well, no, I don't remember any of that, so I had to be gone and
You
was
were probably
with the
gone, yeah.
Bowlings, and I wasn't there for any of that. I do know that they did have an estate, which is wouldn't be peanuts today, but at that time it was a pretty nice estate that was divided up, but between the different children. It was Homer and Earl and Doris and Delphia and myself. I didn't know a thing about that, and they had Doris and Earl and Homer had told the Bowlings that they could use that money, for my education or whatever, and they said they didn't want to touch it. And of course, I knew nothing of this until later, and I was down here in nursing school, and I was 21 on my 25th birthday. I get this letter in the mail from an attorney and a check telling me that I had turned 21. This was my inheritance from the family, and I didn't even. And it was $6,000, and that was a lot of money then.
Yes. And kind of sentimental because it came from your family.
Pardon?
Kind of sentimental even
Yes,
because
yes,
it came
uh-huh.
from the family.
And that I.
But
Because
that
I
you were-
didn't, and there was this Alvin Seal. He was a distant relative too. He was a cousin or something. Family. He was an attorney in Washington, and he was the one who had taken care of the estate all these years. So he knew how old we were and everything, and when to turn the estate, over to us. And I didn't even know I had anything.
Do you remember anything about your mom and dad sitting on their lap or anything, how they were or anything?
And no, I remember one time I had a little rocking chair, and my mother, there were some ladies there. I don't know whether it was a ladies meeting or association or a club or what. And I can remember sitting there and rocking in the rocking chair, and I remember somebody looking over and said, "Isn't she cute?" Those are just little things as a kid that you, and I don't, as I said, I can remember Earl, Dad, Andrew, coming home with this mustache off, and I can sort of vaguely remember the car when they bought the Model T, and there was evidently a lot of commotion about that around Lagodia. They were going up and down the streets, and
I suppose so.
all the older ones, driving it and one thing and another.
You sort of remember the house?
You didn't have to have a license or anything in those days. And I remember we used to have we had a maid, I guess it was, who helped. There was a big oak stove, these great big, what do you call it, round oak, or, and we had, there was a front stairway that went upstairs, and then there was also a back one off of the kitchen. I can remember there was some stairs, and then there was like a little landing, and then there was a door that opened, and there was a back stairway that went up. And I can remember sitting there one day on up on the little landing part of it, and sitting there bumping my head against the door, and this lady who was cooking at the stove, I don't know whether she was a maid or what she was, but anyway, she said, "Oh, don't do that, you're going to knock your brains out."
It's just so hard to
And as I
visualize.
say, whenever I talked about any of these things later, Doris always said, you can't possibly remember that. You heard some of us talk about it, you know, or tell you. Well, maybe I did, I don't know. But there's just certain flashes in my mind that I can just see so plain.
Oh, I believe we have.
That, and I think children remember,
we do.
realize
More
more
than
than we think they do.
Yeah, yeah, I think there's more memory.
Like we don't give them credit for the intelligence that they have.
We don't.
But, but I don't know, I don't ever remember being on anybody's lap or anything of that sort. Now, I couldn't, with the Bowlings, I did. I mean, they were mom and dad, and they were the ones that I remember well.
You said you used to go to Jasper?
Pardon?
You used to go to,
Well, that was, of course, that was after I was in high school.
Sure.
And Earl Lynn would usually have me up maybe for a week in the summer, and Homer and Aurelia would have me down. And yes, I remember, what was his name? I dated a couple fellows in Jasper. One of them became mayor later on. I want to say Marvin Teague, but that's not it.
10?
Huh?
10? No, that was, that'd be
No.
much younger.
Begin with an M. I know there was an. And I can remember they'd have some of these German dances down by the courthouse, and I can remember going to those when I'd be in Jasper. And I also, at minstrel time, I would always get very, very, I guess, what you call PMS, premenstrual syndrome. No, but I would always get fainty and have terrible cramps. I just cramps. I'm telling you now, today, the doctors will go in and dilate the uterus, and this will relieve that cramping, you know, and then they don't have it anymore. But I had it until I had my first baby. And after I had my first baby, I never had the cramps anymore. But anyway, I remember one time I was in Jasper, and we went to church, and what is it, St. John?
St. Joseph.
St.
Hey,
Joseph.
Joseph, when you
And
only one there, then.
and I was going to go up to communion, and I fainted at the communion rail. And I think the next day I started menstruating, and that was just coming up on me, and I remember fainting at the communion rail. And they had to take me back to my seat.
Yeah.
so you were living in Evansville?
No, Washington,
So you
Indiana.
were living in Washington, so you drove to Jasper in,
Yeah.
what was it, a Model T, or what was it?
Oh, well, no, at that time, see, I was living with the Bowlings then. They had a Buick,
Uh-huh.
and they'd take me over, and same way to Indianapolis. Of course, when we go to Indianapolis, there was a back road, and it was, you know, just gravel road. I can remember that, and I can remember there was an area they called Willie Valley Hill, and I've asked several people about it later. I said, there's just nobody seems to know anything about it, but at that time it seemed like a big hill, you know, with the gravel road and everything. And I can remember we'd go to Indianapolis, and we'd kneel down and say some prayers before we left, that we'd make it over Willie Valley Hill. We never had any trouble, but I can remember that there would be some of the farmers and horses out, you know, on the side to help people pull their cars that maybe would slip off in the ditch, you know, if it was rainy weather or something, because it was just mud and gravel, rocky road. But that was, and we didn't think a thing about driving to Indianapolis now. Now they talk about wanting to spend millions of dollars building a new highway to Indianapolis, and the distance and how hard it is to get there. We'd take off and go to Indianapolis. I guess we probably were all day going. I don't know, but we'd go up, and they'd take me up to Earl later.
I guess there wasn't as much traffic.
Pardon?
There wasn't as much
Oh, no,
traffic.
there wasn't the traffic. And I remember we had side curtains on the cars. They didn't have, you know, they didn't have the roll-up windows or anything like. Well, later on we had roll-up windows. I started driving a car when I was 12 years old. We didn't have to have a license in those days. And I remember one day, the house we lived in, I had, you know, the garage was down in the basement. There was a drive. I'm sure I don't think they have them that way anymore, but there was a big concrete drive with the stone coping on either side, and you drove up and down into the basement and closed the garage doors, and the car was underneath the garage was underneath the house. And I used to go down there, I'd get in the car, and I'd try to shift the gears, you know, and sit there and pretend to drive. And so one day during bowling night, Dad, I always say Dad, and then I always think, well, people think I'm talking about Andrew Jones, and I'm not. But he came home, and he was with the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. And he came home, and he walked into the basement here. I'm sitting in the car, you know. And I thought, oh my God, I was really going to get it, you know, for sitting in there and playing with the car, doing something wrong. And he walked up and looked at me, and he said, what you doing? I said, well, I just try and learn how to drive the car and learn how to shift it. And so he said, well, how do you shift it? And so I put it in reverse and first and second and third, you know. And so he came around, opened the door and got in. He said, okay, back it up. Oh. I thought, oh my God. And of course, I can remember that stone coping on each side of the drive. It seemed like it was mountainous, you know. Yeah. And I mean, it seemed so high and so close, you know, because I would, but I backed it out. And and of course, you mentioned the fact that there wasn't traffic in those days, you know, because we didn't know what a street light was or even a stop sign. You just watched at the corners, you know, and places you'd go. And so anyway, I drove the car, and he said, that's wonderful. Now, Gertrude Bowling never drove a car. Wadelphia never did learn to drive. And he said, well, now you can take your mother, where the place she wants to go. Well, I was just thrilled to death. I could drive her to her club and to her church meetings and things of that sort. Of course, I lived close to school, and we walked to school in those days. We didn't think of anything different than walking. And but I remember on Sunday afternoon sometimes they'd let me have the car, and we'd take some kids and we'd drag Maine. So you see,
I bet they drag me.
hello. Yes. Yes. Yes, I'll be there. Thank you, dear. It's a reminder. I have an appointment with the doctor tomorrow, 9:30. I called to remind me, so don't forget it. But,
Where's your bathroom at, real quick? Eddie?
pardon?
Your bathroom?
Oh, right here.
Sorry.
No, go first.
I've been going in the car for a while.
If you see no dining room table or chairs in there, I just gave those to my son Patrick. I don't use them anymore. I don't entertain the way I used to or anything. And they've just bought a new home, and it's much larger than the one they had before. And they had sort of a dinette suite. Anyway, he told me he was going to bring that down, so I'd at least have a table in there, but he never did. And I gave him, my chairs were lyre back and needlepoint, and so they took 4 of them. They took the 2 armchairs and 2 of the others. But I wanted to keep 2 of them because I still have some ladies in. We play cards sometime, and so we use them. I bring them in here, and we use them at this table. So I said, I got to leave 2 chairs.
What cards do you play? Play cinch or something?
Pardon?
What games do you play when you play cards? Cinch?
Play bridge.
Bridge.
And gin rummy. Mm-hmm. Of course, years ago we used to play 500 and euchre.
Sure. Right. Oh yeah.
But
I'm the only person I think in California that plays euchre.
oh, they
and
don't.
every
You know,
once
I
in a-
think euchre's kind of coming back.
And every once in a while I'll find somebody that's actually from Indiana.
Uh-huh.
He goes, I know how to play euchre, and we
Yeah.
get together and we play euchre, you know, and it's
Uh-huh.
like, all right, you know, it's finding somebody, because I played euchre with Mama Jones
Mm-hmm.
a lot.
Yeah, they used to say that it was a Evansville game, and in fact it was listed in the Book of Hoyle
Oh, yeah.
as Evansville. No, that was Clabber. That was. I think that was Clabber, and that wasn't euchre. It was Clabber. But
Do you remember when Homer got married? When Homer at all?
no, I remember meeting Aurelia, and I remember her sister. What was her name? She had a
Mildred.
younger sister.
Mildred? Mildred?
Mildred. And then there was a brother, Marvin.
Myron?
Myron. Mm-hmm. And
Adrian.
of course they were a little older than I was, but
I had Adrian too.
well, I don't know if I knew Adrian.
He was the one that was I don't know, he was,
Well, I think he was
Retired
older. He was
or
married,
something.
wasn't he?
no, he never was married.
He's never been married. Is he, when he was younger?
Uh,
Where'd he come in the family? Isn't that funny? I don't,
I thought he was, he's just a little younger than Aurelia. He was, I thought he was
yeah,
younger.
he was younger than Aurelia.
Yeah, but he was slow, so
He
he was.
was a little bit slow, and I think they might have had him in a school.
well, and I remember the Crimp family. Of course, you know the Crimp family in Jasper, and I know they have a museum there now, don't they? Crimp Museum.
Toward the college, they have it within the civic auditorium.
Well, of course, when I knew them, there was Dolly and Bernice and Earl and anyway, they later came. Let's see, Ray was Ray. They had opened they had the Coca-Cola company in Jasper, and then they opened up one in Washington, and they opened one in Bedford. And I know one of the brothers went to Bedford to run that, and Earl, well, really the mother and dad moved to Washington, and Dolly and I went to school together. We were the same age, because I'd known her in Jasper, but after they moved to Washington, we were in high school together. And she married Johnny Drew from Washington. It was Dolly Drew. And Dolly's still living. Now Earl, the brother Earl, later after the mother and father had died, Earl Cramp ran the Coca-Cola business, and he had a daughter, Shirley. And she lives here in Evansville. She's married to Bob Wright that had the Wright Cadillac, Bob Wright Cadillac Company. And she and I see each other every once in a while, and she always says, Aunt Dolly asks about you, and I always say, well, how is Dolly? And she told me that they have brought her down here sometime to shop, and I said, well, please call me, and maybe we can get together and visit her. And so she always says, well, I'm going to, but I never hear from him.
Your son-in-law's in the car business, isn't he? Sharon's husband?
He was. He isn't. Well, yes, he still, but he doesn't own it. He works for another company. But he used to. His father had an automobile agency, and then he took it over. But he didn't do too well. It kind of went to pot, so he sold it. I mean, he wasn't. It was up in Boonville.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Higgins Ziemer Ford.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was later. Ed, when they got. In fact, they were financial kind of in a bind, and so they had wondered if some of our family wouldn't come into it and we could make an investment in it. And of course, I did and let Ed go in, but anyway, he didn't know a damn thing about the automobile business, and they didn't do too well. So anyway, they finally sold it. And but every once in a while, I'll see a license on the back of a car.
Yeah.
That tag that they have, and it says
Higgins
Higgins Ziemer Ford.
What does Sharon's husband do now?
Pardon?
He works for a car.
Yeah, he works for a company in Morganfield, Kentucky, or Madisonville, Kentucky. I don't know. He goes over there every day. He heads the sales, and I mean, he's sort of manages and runs.
Do all
it.
the children live in Evansville?
Sharon's oldest son, Gib, he lived in Nebraska, Omaha, Nebraska, but he's just moved back here recently, and he's living in Newburgh. And the funny thing was, when they went looking for a house and went up to Newburgh, here was Sharon and Bill's old home for sale. And he bought the home that he was raised up in.
That's neat.
And he has two children, that's my two great-grandchildren. And then Camilla, the daughter, is my namesake, and she's married to a fellow that lives in Louisville, and she just was married a year ago this July. And he is he does insurance investment for banks and insurance companies and things. What do you call it? Insurance broker or something?
Sure.
I mean, that's the kind of work he does. They've got a lovely home in Louisville. And when she got pregnant and had a miscarriage, it's been very recent. So they were very upset about it, but I told myself, you're still young, you got time to have a baby. And then Andrew lives here in Evansville. he's in the insurance business also. And, but he's married, lives here in Evansville. So all three of Sharon's are married.
Now, does Ted, he's an attorney.
He's an attorney.
Is he a special attorney? I mean, is he a
Well,
more
he
corporate?
has his own firm.
Does he just do corporate business?
Huh?
Does he just do corporate business or,
Corporate, he does corporate law, and he doesn't do a lot of, well, they have some jury trials, but he has one of the younger members they have in there.
do
He-
they, I like divorces and things like that, do they handle those kind of?
Yeah, I think so. He was Bernie's attorney.
Also, you're looking for Don here, so you're fishing around. Is that what you're doing here?
See, when he went in the firm, I mean, when he was taken in, it was early Arnold and Ziemer. And he was the youngest member. Of course, in the meantime, John Early died and Paul Arnold has retired. And so, but it was still early Arnold and Ziemer for a long time. And they just reincorporated here about a couple of years ago. And he had about 4 associates in the office with him and that he's taken in as partners. So now it's Ziemer, Stamen, Weitzel, and I can't even think of the other's name. And but he's quite prominent in Evansville, the youngest one. He does all their court trials and divorce trials. I mean, he handles all that sort of stuff, that part of the, and they do mostly corporate law and with large firms and businesses and one thing and another. They got a fine firm. They're down in Old National Bank building on the 17th floor. Yeah.
We talked about Ted
No,
and Sharon, which
no,
one do we
15th
talk
floor. They're on
about?
the 15th floor. They've almost got the whole floor. It's a large firm. And of course he's the oldest in the family, but he didn't marry till later. He was, when he went to St. Louis University, and then he was going to go to medical school. And then he had to, but he had to go into service. At that time, they still had compulsory military service. So he was over in Germany for 3 years. And then in the meantime, he decided that he didn't think, well, as a matter of fact, he was in the medics while he was in the service. And they even called him Dr. Ziemer. And we even had letters of commendation of the wonderful things that he did, you know, with the soldiers and everybody there. But he said, oh, I just got so fed up with that stuff. He said, I decided that wasn't for me. I wasn't going into medicine. So then that's when he decided to go into law. And so then he went to Indiana University Law School. So see, Sharon was married before he was, and I guess Jerry was too. Because he didn't marry till after he was out of law school. And the funny thing was that we lived on College Highway at that time. Were you ever there at our home on College Highway? I was going to say, I thought you were. And the Daves, Dr. Daves, lived next door to us. And he had 2 daughters and a son. Now, the older daughter was about Ted's age, and he used to date her when he was in high school. But then after he went away to college, and she went to St. Mary's the Woods, and then she went, I think she went to school or was on vacation or something over in London, and she meets this young man in London who also became an attorney. What is it they call him, barrister. And so anyway, when Ted came home, after he finished college at St. Louis University, and then he had his 3 years in service in Germany, and then he came home, was going to enter law school. He got home in August and was entering school in September, and he had already applied. He had applied to the University of Kentucky and Washington University and Indiana University. I know we asked a neighbor friend of ours, Jim Duto, who was an attorney. He said, well, he'd been accepted in all 3, and he wondered which one he should go to. And so we talked to Jim Duto, and he said, well, I'll tell you, if he wants to get into politics and things of that sort, go to Washington University. He said, I see no reason at all for him to go to Kentucky University. And he said, other than if he wants to practice in Evansville, and he would suggest that he go to Indiana University. So that's what he did. Well, the funny thing is, he's been in politics all of his life. I got letters in there right now of campaign things that are coming up. He's our main fundraiser, and he's just always been involved. I've sometimes thought he should have gone to Washington. I think,
Maybe so.
I think he'd have
Might end
traveled.
up,
He'd have traveled up in that field.
May have.
But he's quite a, well, I've got some pictures in here of each of them with their immediate families, if you'd like to look
Yeah.
at them.
I'll take some
He wants
pictures
a
before I
videotape.
leave. I can get real close with them and I'll
Yeah.
videotape.
What'd you
it.
say?
He wants a videotape.
Yeah,
Oh,
his
yeah.
camera run and
Oh, the
takes it.
portraits?
Yeah, before I leave, and then
Then
when
we
we
can
talk
edit
about them,
that.
I can go back and put
We're
them
gonna
in.
edit all this together.
Well, I just keep wandering off. I mean, I'm not talking
That's
much about the
okay.
Joneses because really I was,
But
Well, you are a Jones, and that's what we
Huh?
want. You are a Jones, and that's what we want.
yes,
You.
I am
were-
by birthright,
Yeah.
but I was really not raised
But,
with
I
the
mean,
family.
Not
Yeah.
raised, but that was no disgrace for them.
For
I mean,
Oh,
that was
no,
unpreventable,
there was
but
nothing,
you're still.
but it was just one of those
See,
things.
they
that-
wouldn't let you not be a Jones, and we aren't going to either. We're still claiming you. You're still
I'm
ours.
still a Jones.
Yeah.
You're still ours.
Two people claim her.
One of the Jones girls.
Yeah.
So what I was wondering though is, we were talking earlier, do you remember Homer getting married?
I really don't. Isn't that funny? As I said, I remember we got off with talking about our sisters and brothers. I remember meeting Aurelia, and I remember they were going to get married. But it kind of seems to me like I went over to Jasper for the wedding. But and the funny, it's just kind of blank in my mind. I
But
just
they
don't.
were only together like 6 days when he came back from service, so I imagine it was just, a quickly arranged
Uh-huh.
way.
Yeah, it was different than things are done today.
Yes.
And the same way with my brother Earl. I mean, he and Lillian Jones were married, and they were married somewhere in church, but I wasn't there. As a matter of fact, as I said, I don't even remember getting gifts or anything from my brothers and sisters, as a child or anything. It just seemed like they were busy, they were getting married, having their own families and one thing and another, and
Well, I have a necklace that you sent me for, I think, 8th grade graduation. I have little things that you sent me.
oh, really? Well,
Yes,
good.
I have them.
Mhm.
And then my first marriage, you sent a silver tray. I have that. I remember the things, but I've
got
always
a
been
silver
sent.
tray you sent me. too.
Oh, really?
And
Well,
I remember the sentimental things. That's why I held on anything that belonged to my dad. My dad's relatives.
You remember Uncle Tom losing his arm too, huh?
Uncle who?
Tom,
Tommy.
Tommy.
Oh, yeah, well, I remember Tom, and as I said, I remember kind of pulling them in the wagon up and down the street and helping them ride their bicycles or tricycles, probably tricycles.
Yeah.
And I can remember one night I was at your house, and we were sitting we were in the bedroom, and I don't know, I guess maybe listening to the radio. Why we didn't have television then, I'm sure. And I remember Homer started tickling me. And I could just remember just giggling and laughing and telling him to quit. It's funny how just a little song that comes to your mind. I remember he just got the biggest kick out of
Do
it.
you remember War Strange?
Strange.
Uh-huh. He used to come down to see us at Jasper all the time, and every time he did, he'd bring Limburger cheese, and him and I'd eat Limburger cheese.
Well, where was he from?
Washington.
Oh, from Washington. I was going to say, when you said strange, the name seemed familiar, but I
I
don't.
remember him. He was my buddy, boy. He'd come down and say, "Come here, Tom." Him, he'd have a block of this real old silver paper wrapped around the stinking time. Him and I'd go over and eat it.
Well, I remember one boy, the young man that I had some dates with in Washington, I mean in Jasper. We used to go to the KFCs. They'd have dances.
Right.
And he had a motorcycle. And I remember he drove the motorcycle up to your mother and dad's house, and I'd go out and talk to him, And then after I'd gone back to Washington, he called up one time, wanted to know if he could come over to Washington to see me. And of course I asked Gertrude and Julian whether he could come over, and they said, well, yes, that he could come over. And here he drives over on that motorcycle. and wanted me to ride the motorcycle and go on a date. I'd never been on a motorcycle in my life. And they wouldn't have any part of it. They said, you send him back to Jasper.
That would have been interesting to remember who this was when that we would have remembered who it was.
It's just episodes like that that flash through your mind.
So eventually, to put a cap on this, once we do this, I just want to ask you two things. How would you describe yourself to your great grandchildren?
Stop it.
How do I describe myself?
How would you describe, what kind of woman are
To
you?
your great, let's say great.
Your great
Great,
great grandchildren
great,
can see
I'm
this.
great.
There you go.
Well, I've never done that. We've all been very close, and I've been helped them a lot financially, and helped my grandchildren. I've several of them. I've helped through college, and they've all been very close to me. So I don't know how I would express myself, except that they're all delightful young people, and I'm very fond of them. And
What kind of woman are you, though? How would you describe yourself? I get
I
this
don't
a
know.
lot.
You could tell me that better than I can.
He does that to everybody, to close
And
this.
just
We
kids,
all
everybody
freak
listens
out.
and goes.
Nobody likes it.
Well, I don't know. I'm considered a very social lady, and I belong to a lot of organizations. Just after I graduated from St. Mary's School of Nursing, I went to the University of Evansville and got my BS degree. And of course, I worked in drama there at the university. That's where I met this Ron Glass. That's where I knew him from. In fact, he was back here one time when they were doing a play, and he used to St. John. He's a black boy, and St. John's Church down on Belle Meade. We used to go down there because it was the first church in Evansville that was air conditioned. And we used to go there a lot of time on Sunday because it was air conditioned. And I know he used to be a reader in church, and I always thought, oh, he looks so nice. But of course, I knew him through the drama department at the university. And so he was back here one time for homecoming of some kind that they were having. And I know I went up to him. They had a reception for him out at the country club, and I went up and I said, he said something about, oh, I remember you when you were doing some directing over at the university. And I said, yes. And I said, I remember you when you were a reader at St. John's Church. He said, oh, my God. But anyway, he's, you check into him. He's, well, he, I can't think what he has done, but he's,
Even things I have.
what's the, there was a series sometime back, I want to say The Odd Couple, but that wasn't what it was.
It's television.
But anyway, then later on, they redid this series with black people, and he was to take a leading part in that, but it washed out. I don't think it was ever very successful. But he's been in several movies, and
Does he live in Hollywood?
You know.
yes, he's in Hollywood.
So he will find out
Yeah.
that because he's out there and works with the stagehands and everything.
Okay, then the last thing, I guess, is what kind of advice would you give children of the future that will never meet you?
Oh dear. I don't really think of myself as an advisor. I think it's good for them to get their educations, and I hope that they try to be morally good. I think the moral standards today are horrible. Oh my, no, that's my,
Just so you know, huh?
yes, okay. That's the pharmacist. I ordered a couple of my prescriptions this morning. Everything happens at once. I even had part of my cable system went out, and I had called the cable TV, and they called just shortly before you did. And when it rings twice when it's from downstairs, and then you have to dial. I have to dial to let them in. And when I thought maybe it was you then, and he said, "Yes, cable service," and I thought, "Oh my."
That's the guy that was leaving when we come
We
in.
saw
I
him.
saw him try.
Sir.
Oh, did you? Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, he came in but he didn't. I tell you, my color was kind of acting up, and I went down there kind of adjusting some of the buttons for the color, and I think I hit something I shouldn't, and it knocked all my stations out from 11 on cable, and So anyway, he came and just pressed one button and everything was back again. But I didn't know. He showed me though. He said, now if it happens again, he said, see this button right down here, well, you press that and then punch it to your stations as they come up.
Reset button.
And they come right back. Excuse me. Thank you, sir. My pharmacy, my medications.
Now, you were given the advice to the future, education, and
So let's start over this. So what kind of advice would you give?
start
Future
over till we
children.
get.
Take two.
Of course, mine, I always, as I said, when I was raising my family, I always thought it was very important that they be at home and have entertainment at home, and we did. In fact, my husband and I gave up, couples would be going to parties and things, and they'd want us to join them, but it'd be like Valentine's or Thanksgiving or Christmas or what have you, and we always had, all of our family we'd always be together. In fact, up until about 5 years ago, I had them all here, and I have 29 to 30 for Christmas, Thanksgiving, and Easter, and they've gradually taken it away from me, and they take turns having it now. And we always had parties at home, and we had a big recreation room. We'd let them bring their friends, and we had a lake, and they'd go swimming and, ice skating in the winter and one thing another, and we always thought that was important, and I think it's very important. I think that's why I have a lot of people. I've had people come up to me, as one came one day, and she said, how did you manage to raise such a wonderful family? And I said, well, I wasn't sure whether it was a compliment or an insult. I didn't, whether she thought I wasn't capable. But I really, the young people today don't have any place to go or anything to do. But I want to tell you, my children are raising theirs the same way. They're letting them come to their home and let them bring their friends and let them have
That's what I
parties.
do.
And I think that's very important. There's so many of these kids are out here now dragging Green River Road and getting in trouble and getting on drugs and alcohol and one thing or another, and they and then they say, well, they haven't got anything to do. Well, I really blame their parents, but then on the other hand, there's today, both parents, so many times both parents are working, and you just don't, I mean, I was a homebody, and I was at home. And I was a registered nurse, and I could have gone back on going on as nursing, but I didn't. I did do some volunteer work, and but I always had the family at home, and my children have done the same thing. But as I said, I hear so much of morals nowadays that it seems like they go out on one date and they expect them to go to bed. And it just seems like there's, I feel like that men look at women as a sex figure nowadays. Well, I don't think that, huh?
You didn't have to say that to me.
Say
that.
Oh, I said, I mean,
This generation.
the younger generations, they do, and the girls dress so damn sexy that, and the fellows always say, well, the girls are coming on to them. Well, do you know most of these designers are men, and this is the way they want the girls to look. And the girls want to be in style, so they wear all these things, and the boys think that they're just coming on to them. And it just seems like you can't have it's just hard to have a happy medium anywhere along the line. And so, anyway, I would say for them all to have their family life, and we still do. We still get together, we have our families, and have wonderful times together.
So you must have had that too. You sat around, listened to the radio, and played
Well,
music.
until we got television, of course. Yeah, they used to listen to radio. I mean, but of course, my kids were still quite young when we got our first television. And I remember that in our living room, the carpet was about worn out in front of the television because the kids would all come and all sit around, watch the television.
What kind of radio programs do you remember?
What do I watch?
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, when you were young, was there they had all those radio shows and stuff? Do you remember what?
Well, of course, I can't even remember the names of the old radio shows, but on television, I watch soaps. There's some of the soaps I like. All My Children and Another World and General Hospital.
My daughter's
And I like medical programs. I like and I like detective things. I like Magnum PI, and I like LA Law and Murder She Wrote. And those, and of course I have my VCR, and what I can't watch, I tape. Watch it later. And I think the kids do that too, and that's another thing. I think there's so much vulgarity on these things nowadays. Now it doesn't appeal to me at all. I just shut it off and that's why I said I like detective stories, I like mystery stories, I like things that have got some background and meat in them, you know. But this sex stuff, I just wouldn't give you a dime for. But it's the young people don't know anything else.
Sure.
They look at it, and that's just the way that's the way they learn. They think that's the way to do. The other night, my telephone rang about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I thought, oh my goodness, who's this? You know, it scared me. You know, I thought somebody was sick or had an accident or something. And there was some little girl said, "Is Katie there?" And I said, "Katie? You mean Katie Ziemer?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Oh, honey, you have her grandmother's home." So I gave her Katie's number, and that's my son's youngest daughter. And so anyway, I talked to Katie, I think the next day, and I asked her who in the world I was calling her. She said, "I don't know." She said, "We had our phone on the answering service," and she said evidently when they got the answering service, they must have hung up because she said there was nobody on there this morning. So I don't know, but now who was some little girl calling her at 2 o'clock in the morning?
Well, does this media, does our media and our magazines and all the honoriness, is that what's making society bad, or is bad society making the media? I throw that in
Well,
my
of course,
class in school.
I mean, there's a little of both.
I throw that in my class in school all the time. For conversation, make the children think.
Do they? Do they?
They sit there, I don't know, that's all
They never
they've
thought
seen.
about
They're
it.
young and that's all they've seen. But these young kids go to these kind of movies and everything. What kind of reaction would they have?
Well, that's right. They don't know anything any different. And they talk so much about sex so pointedly. And I mean, think nothing about it. They talk about.
They do it.
Well, yeah. Well, they say that they do it. Of course, I don't see any of the shows that they do it, but I mean, that's even on some of the shows. And there was the other day on, I don't know, Phil Donahue or somewhere, they had these couples were talking about married couples, you know, interchanging and one thing another. And the way they talk, there's just so much of that going on. And I think, oh, for God's sakes. And what? I guess there's things go on that we don't know about.
Oh, I wanna know about.
But you see, when they
I
when
wanna
they
know
tell
about
it
it.
on television, it makes it sound like it's all over the world, and that's not true. I mean, there's still a lot of decent people in the world.
They're showing the worst part because that's what sells. It's what sells the programs.
So is there
Yeah,
anything-
well, yeah, that's what they want. They want to make money. That's
Oh my God.
Is there anything you like to say at the end of this interview? You want to put it all together? Is there anything you'd like to wrap up? Anything at all you'd like to say to the family at all that are going to watch this that don't know you at all? My cousins and stuff.
Well, I'm sorry that I didn't know my own family better, but I am still certainly a part of it. And I was born in Jones, and I shall always be. But I didn't, as I said, I didn't grow up with them, and I think I was a very fortunate young lady to have grown up with such a wonderful family and have them be so good to me. And as I said, they had no other children. I've sometimes thought, you know, I've always kind of been alone. You know, I mean, it seemed like I was the only one that's left out of the Jones family, and then they had, of course, the Bowlings had no other children. You know, I think sometimes it seems like I've different things like that well, of course, I'm not with my family or anything, but there's just been different times that things come up that I think, oh, I guess I was meant to be alone. Well, I mean, right now, my husband's been dead for 19 years, and I live here alone, and it gets lonely. It really does. There's times, of course, I have things to do, and I belong to clubs and organizations, but I don't go as much as I used to, and so many of my friends are in nursing homes, or they've had strokes or heart attacks, and they're not able to go. As a matter of fact, I do all the driving. I mean, the Lord blessed me with good vision, and I have so many times you know, we do go someplace. I have friends that just won't drive at night. The lights bother them. And as a matter of fact, Dr. Willison was giving me a physical here a few years ago, and he was looking in my eyes, and he said, how long has it been since you had your eyes checked? And I said, oh, Lord. I said, I started reading glasses when I was in my 30s or so. And I said, using reading glasses, but I said, I've always never had any reason to have to go and have my eyes checked. He said, well, I think we better get them checked. So that disturbed me very much. You know, I thought, oh my God, something's happening. So he makes me an appointment with this Dr. Pavlik, who is he's quite an eye surgeon in Evansville. He's well known. And so I went to Pavlik's office, and of course they took me in a little room, and the nurse came in, and they put all the lights and everything up, and she left the room, and first thing you know, another nurse came in and started. I said, oh, honey, one nurse just did this. And she said, well, doctor wants me to double check. And I thought, oh, boy, they're really finding something. I got some glaucoma or something coming on. And so she left the room, and he came in. And I think the fact that a doctor had told me that had made the reservation and had me come, you know, anyway, because he came in and he checked me, and I'm sitting there, my heart pounding, thinking, oh my God, they're really finding something. He put his instruments down. He said, I don't know what the hell you're doing here. He said, you're just wasting your money and my time.
Perfect time. That's wonderful. That is good.
I said, well, you don't have to charge me if you don't want to. He said, your bill will be out at the desk. So, anyway, well, everything we talk about, I seem to get off on another detachment. We were talking about something a while ago that I got off of, it came back to me and I forget. But I don't know, I think, I do feel sorry. I feel sorry for my children raising their children, but so far they've all done fine. And they've, oh, I know one thing I started to tell a while ago about Diane, this sister of the Daves, the girl who went to London and met this attorney. But anyway, when Ted Jr. came home, he'd finished college, had been in service, and he came home and was going to go to law school in September. And he got an invitation from Freddie Kent. Have you heard of the Kenny Kent Chevrolet company here in Evansville? Well, Freddie was one of their sons, and he was having a party at their house, and Ted had sent an invitation to Ted and said, bring your date or guest, you know. So he said to me, Mother, who in the world am I going to take? He said, every girl I ever dated is either already married or they're engaged, or I don't know who to take. And I studied a little bit, and I said, well, honey, what about Claire Daves next door? And he said, Claire Daves? And Mother, she's in grade school. I said, honey, she was in grade school when you started college. But I said, remember, you've gone through college. You've been over in Germany for 3 years. I said, she's in college now. I said, she's quite a nice-looking young lady. Oh, Mother, you think I want to rob the cradle? And so anyway, he went to the party by himself. So he was there, and first thing you know, somebody came up and put their hands over his eyes, you know, and said, guess who, you know. And he thought, and finally she put her hands down. He looked at her, and he said, Claire? And she said, he just couldn't get over it. So she was this grown young lady. He came home that night. We were in bed, and he came to the bedroom, woke us up, and he said, Mother, Claire was there, and she's a beautiful young lady. Well, anyway, he was going to Indiana University, and she was at St. Mary's of the Woods, and so they were close, you know, and he'd have her over at the Woods for parties, and he'd go over there, and he went to school summer and winter because he wanted to get through law school, so he finished it in 2.5 years, and because he went to school through the summer too. But he'd be home like at Christmas and Thanksgiving and Easter and times like that, and they would be together. And the first thing you know, he wanted to buy her a ring, and they were getting engaged. So, and we always kidded about that. We said Diane went all the way to London to find a husband, and Claire married the boy next door. So, well, anyway, I hope I haven't bored you.
Oh, that is fascinating.
Well, it's been fun reminiscing because
It's been great, I gotta tell you. We learned a lot about our family that nobody would have ever known, and it would have been lost.
well, perhaps about my part of it anyway,
Sure.
because
Everyone, they've learned something
Oh,
about.
everybody
Every
had
interview
something
they've
that
done,
they
they've
didn't
learned
know,
something
you know, it's
about.
like,
Yeah,
And
even
I've
Mom,
learned
yeah.
I've learned extra things by doing this.
just,
It's been exciting, actually.
well, I've had a very happy, fortunate life, and I was very unhappy to lose my husband, and I have had 2 gentlemen friends since then, but nothing serious. No marriages or anything. I wasn't interested. And one of them died of a heart attack, and the other one, though as a matter of fact, he had very bad vision, and he couldn't see hardly to drive his car. And well, the first time we went out on a date, I guess I must have been nervous because when we got ready to come home, we went out to the country club for dinner, and we got ready to come home. He handed me the keys, and he said, "Here, I think you better drive. I could tell you were nervous." So after that, every time we'd get in the car, you know, I'd drive. So I asked him one day, I said, "Well, have you had," he wore, of course, real thick glasses, and I said, "Have you ever had your eyes checked?" If I, oh yes, he'd had cataracts removed, but his vision was still bad. And I said, "Well, have you ever had thought of contacts?" And he said, "Oh, the doctors told me I could never use contacts." And I said, "Now, when was that?" "Well, that was about 12 years ago." I said, "Well, there's been a lot of changes since then." So I got him to go to a doctor and wear contacts. Well, then he was always having trouble losing them, and we'd have to find them, and one thing or another. And finally, I got him to an eye doctor, and they did implants, and my God, he was like a different person. He was 10 years younger. He had such beautiful vision. Because then he began getting a little serious and wanted me to get married, and I said, "No way. You'll have to find somebody else." So he did.
So it did.
Yeah. House is beautiful.
Is it all right if he takes pictures of the portraits?
Yeah, did you want the base moved or anything?
No, you know, he was talking about your car, the Model T.
Oh yeah, that looks about like it. Well, let me get my glasses. See, I need.
My grandmother was JP, Pop Troxler. I went up there and Papa Troxler says, he told a cop, "You ain't gonna get no money," and the prosecutor ain't getting the money, so it was $1.50 fine. $1 fine, 50 cents docket fee. I said, "Grandpa, I ain't got any money." He said, "Well, I'll pay it."
Not cute. Oh, how cute.
See the old 35, 36
Yeah,
cars? I was in
yeah,
high school.
yeah.
Going to high school. Had 23 guys in that Model T when I
Well, now
got
this I was going to say. Now that looks a lot like the car that Grandpa Foley, my brother, Guy Jones, had when he.
That was a 27 model, I believe that was.
Well,
His was probably
this was before that.
Yeah. See, there's looking up
Well,
Jazz.
see, I was born 1911, and I was 1915, 1916. So it was one of the
See,
first
our
ones.
high school was out here, and that was looking up towards the courthouse.
Oh yes, I see the
See,
courthouse.
a 35.
Oh, that's where we used to have the dances right there around the courthouse.
I see a 35 model
Must be
car
cheap.
sitting around.
That's
Some kid took it and going up the
well,
street.
that's cute. That's good. Oh, I've got all kinds of
Oh,
collector's
you know,
items.
we were just looking at all your beautiful things. And I was saying, you know, because Mom's got a thimble collection. And it seems like everybody I've met in this family has some kind of, oh my God, Mom, she's got a spoon collection.
Spoons? Oh,
I
yes.
have. Mom has one too.
I've gotten from all over the world.
And it's so funny because I'm going, what is this,
we
a
did a lot
Jones?
of, we did a lot of traveling.
So what is it, a Jones jean or something?
So I sat down one day and started on them, and right out I had packed stacks all over the place. And it just looked like a cyclone in there. And I had that for about, what do you call it, booklets, you know. And gave each one of them everything. I said, "Now you go through it now." Well, they just couldn't get over some of the stuff.
She and Doug were in my attic since they've been here. Yesterday it was starting to rain, so we went through all these things.
Well, I bought this in Italy.
Wait a minute, one picture at a time. When'd you get this picture painted?
They're all hand inlaid. This came from
And
Italy.
this-
Inlaid, all inlaid.
Uh-huh.
And this desk over here.
So let's talk about your portrait over here.
Helene Colbert Studios.
Uh-huh. How long ago was this?
How old were you then, Camilla?
They were a very prominent studio here for a number of years, but pardon?
How old were you then?
Well, I have to think. I was about 48, something like that.
Ooh, here, let's try this. Stand by your picture and look at me.
Stand by your picture and look at him. He
Oh.
wants to put his side of you.
Oh, I'm afraid.
The real
The old
McCoy.
gray mare, she ain't what she used to be.
Scoot over just a little bit more. Stand right in front of it. Yeah, just right in front of it. Yeah, there you go.
Still see it? Yeah, you can still see the head.
Yeah.
You still see both of them.
There we go. Now we're.
Need to put on my lipstick and comb my hair and.
Well, I caught everybody, I think, just the way they look there. That's fantastic. Thank you. It's great.
Okay. My only daughter. I have 4 sons and 1 daughter.
Uh-huh.
And this is Brussels lace. I handmade. I brought that. We were in Belgium, and there was so much of this Belgian lace, you know. And I saw this wedding veil, and of course she wasn't even engaged to anybody, to my knowledge. And anyway, I thought it was so beautiful. I thought, well, I'm gonna buy it whenever she gets married. She can wear it. When I got home, by golly, she was going steady with Bill Higgins, and they were getting engaged.
Kind of a
boy,
premonition.
I thought it just, yeah, it must have been. No, I just thought it was so beautiful. I thought, oh, I've got to buy that Belgian lace
Did you
veil.
show her that? Maybe she got married so she.
City Lane, maybe?
Well, when Camilla was married, her daughter, she wore that veil. But one of them, one of them, and in fact, borrowed the wedding gown.
There's a lot of good family pictures in
We have to get Uncle Ted. That's
Uncle-
her husband.
Oh, she
I got
did.
him.
Honey, I did.
I got a real nice picture
We've
here.
got family pictures.
Well, this is,
here.
these
Whoa.
Whoa,
wow.
She's a Jones. Every Jones house I've been to, family.
Oh, now see, that's Ted Jr., he's the oldest, and that's
Wait a minute,
Sharon,
go slow here.
my daughter, and then I've got their families like down from them.
All right, so that's Ted there, and then right next to her,
Is Sharon,
and then,
there's, here, Jerry is next,
uh-huh.
and Ed, and then Pat was the baby, so when they got married, and I've got pictures of their kids stuck in there, I put those back in the center then, see, that's a family portrait. My husband and I, and Ted, Sharon, Jerry, Ed, and Pat. Yeah, that's an old primer too. This was our home out in Prattsville. Who's going to get that painting when I die? Everybody wants it.
So this is your family. Can you point out your name off your family? Just
What?
get it, point out your family on there. They're all names.
Wait, who's who? Well, of course, this is my husband Ted,
Right.
and this is me,
Uh-huh.
and this is Ted Jr., Sharon, Ed, Jerry, and Pat. And this is my portrait and one I had done of my daughter. She has that.
Uh-huh.
When we moved here, I didn't have room for all of it, so I gave her hers. And
Is Carol still alive?
Carol's dead.
I thought he was.
Yeah, Carol died.
So who's Uncle Earl sitting with
Who's
here?
that lady he's with?
Pardon?
Who's the lady
He's
Uncle Earl?
with
Earl. The lady?
With
Oh, it's
Uncle-
me.
Is that you?
Yeah.
That is?
No, because of the profile I couldn't tell. That's
Yeah,
why.
well, I didn't think it was very good of me, but that was taken. We were up at
I didn't know it was you.
Indianapolis at something.
Because you can't see her face. I didn't see so much of it.
I don't know, I wonder what I did with that. Picture of Earl. There's our.
Do you know what year this was by any
There's Santa
chance?
Claus. There's.
Do you have any idea when this picture was taken?
I haven't got it marked on the back, have I?
We can look now.
Let's see, he's been dead
Let's see, this
about
says.
5 years, and it was his name on there.
I talked to my camera.
So we do the voiceovers again if we have to.
They say it happens to a lot of guys when they get into that for so long.
They talked to cameras.
They talked
That was at Camilla's home.
Me and
That's
Avery.
Ted Jr.
We're on the
And that's one of me. Here's
That's the house they
Aunt Camilla and her husband's
all
home.
family together with Santa Claus.
Ted.
Uncle Ted and Aunt Camilla's home.
Do you know how?
That's
Do you
not
remember
the new
when
one.
this house was
So
built
that
here?
that isn't.
By any chance, do you remember when this house was
When your
built?
house was built.
Let's see, about 1940,
Do you remember how much it cost?
$25,000.
Oh,
That's
sure.
what these kids are so shy. He said, why do you ask people?
Oh, and it was 3 stories in the back, had a big family room. Now that didn't include the ground and the lake, and we had stables in the back, and had saddle horses, and it was a beautiful home, and it was all completely excavated even underneath the porch and the garage downstairs. We had a big ping pong room and a big recreation room, fireplace.
buy a house
And
without
it was walkout in the back. See, there was a hill that went down and it was 3 stories in the back.
When did you build that, you say?
Well, let's see, we were married in 34, 6, 7, 8, 9, about 1940.
Could be 200,000 or 300,000.
I don't think that estate you couldn't
Well,
get
our
for
first
that.
I
house
mean,
in-
the house.
Where's this at exactly? Where's
on
in
Crattsville Road, 6426 Crattsville Road. I don't know whether you were familiar.
Evansville, Indiana?
Uh-huh.
Evansville.
Mhm.
I know where Crattsville Road's at, but I didn't.
Yeah, we had about 8 acres out there. and we
It's
had-
out past Diamond Avenue then, out north of Diamond?
Yeah, it's past Diamond Avenue.
North of Diamond.
Do you know where the Kennel Club is in Evansville?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, see, that's on Crattsville Road,
Oh, yeah.
well, beyond the Kennel Club.
That's her family updated
This is updated picture.
of the family.
Debbie, can you, and Camilla, can you come in here and point these out with your little finger again, who everybody is?
Can it come out?
Here, I'll.
Mom,
put
can
it
you
on-
point?
Okay, I just,
But he wants your finger again. He needs your finger again.
my finger?
Yeah, just put your finger on there and tell us who each person
I'm
is
going to
again.
grab my glasses, I can see.
Of course, that's me, and that's Ted Jr. He's the oldest, and that's Sharon. She's next, and this is Jerry. He's number 3. He's the one that has the funeral homes. This is Ed. He is promotion director of a BFI, and this is my son Patrick. He's in sales and advertising. And Santa Claus.
Oh, thank you. Wait a minute, I'm not ready.
3 children.
Let me get in here and it takes forever for me to do this.
Ted
Okay.
Jr., sir. And this is his oldest daughter, Ellen, and Katie, and little Teddy.
I've got news.
All right.
And now this is,
All
this
right,
is,
now wait. Just give me a second
this
here.
is Sharon's family.
Takes a little while
The
here.
light's on, it's hard for me to see, am I in your way?
Uh-huh. No, just wait.
But this is Sharon,
Uh-huh.
and this is Bill over here. Now, that's her oldest son, Gib. Oh, this was at the wedding. This is Camilla and her husband. And this is Andrew and his wife. She's almost cut off of the picture. And then this is Gib's wife and the 2 great-grandchildren.
What's their names? You know?
Elaine, and Leslie and Courtney.
Okay. They're cute. All right, and where are we going next? Down?
This is Edward and his son Edward. He's in the Navy. And Janie, she goes to University of Alabama. His wife Barbara, and their youngest son, little Eddie.
Great. And we'll go up to that second picture
And
there.
this is my oldest son. But this is the one that has the funeral homes. This is Jerry, his wife Patty, and this is Jay, Amy, Daniel, and Michael. And this is my youngest son Patrick, and his wife Debbie, and their oldest son. He starts to high school next year. Jay and God, I can't think of their names. Elaine's the little girl, and isn't that awful? I can't even think of his name.
It's a blank.
Laney and Jay and PJ. This is PJ, Patrick Julian. He's named for his father, and they call him PJ. And this is God, isn't that awful? No, I'm just going blank. Now, this is Elaine, Laney. Gabriel. His name's Gabriel. He's the angel Gabriel.
Beautiful name.
Call him Gabe. Oh, these are some postcards and all from some of our trips.
Yeah, I do that too. Faster than taking pictures.
Now that's PJ, that's Jerry's old son. This is Gabe and Laney. Those are 3 pictures of Pat's 3 children. And none of these are too old. They're.
So I guess there's maybe Ted isn't in on any of those.
Sharon's got my album that it's got the older pictures in it. No, I don't think he's in any of these. He was gone.
Okay.
These were all taken.
Okay. Dumpy's 50th anniversary.
Oh yeah.
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 But then,
Well, now see, I remember Delphi's wedding because I was in it. I was her matron of honor. See, I was married before she was. She was older than I, but I was married. I was pregnant with my second child when they got married.
I don't know.
She's 8 years older than you, ain't she? Ain't you
Well,
said
she's
she's
about 4 years older than me.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, 80.
See, I was just 80.
Was it 88? I think it was.
I don't know.
Was she
I
that
really
much
don't
older
know.
than you?
Well, I got it on
Seemed like
film
it.
We've
somewhere.
got it on film.
I believe it was 88.
Well, I know I know she's older than I
Yeah,
am.
she said she was older.
I was a baby.
She was the baby in the family.
I was a baby. And,
I love all your knickknacks, but we're just, like you say, I think Joneses are just collectors.
now a lot of these, a lot of this stuff is from travels too, from around the world. Different
Nice home.
things in my back, and I can't stoop and throw the ball and do the
Well,
things
they
I.
Mm-hmm. 1916?
And Camilla's first 12, 13, 14.
Or 17, I guess. 16, 17, I was.
And the cross your
I
mom
was
gave you?
First grade.
Uh-huh.
I ran out of room on my rack. I have to get in there.
Pardon?
I ran out of room on my rack.
The spoons?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's one thing. Spoons and charms, and anytime we'd travel to different places, I'd always buy a spoon and a charm. And nobody wears charm bracelets anymore, but
You know what I did with mine just recently? I took them all